There's some tips and tricks from my side. Make sure after all these things that we've done, we have identified all the most possible dimensions. Start with the columns first. So these columns could be to do, doing, done, or in the context of development, it could be the things to be done, or the sprint backlog, things to do, still to do. We have not done it yet. And then in process or in progress or doing, then development, it could be development, it could be testing, it could be deployed, it could be further refined further into deployed on UAT environment, deployed on live environment. So there are multiple ways of tracking. Again, there's no prescriptive, there's no one size fits all and the only correct way. There's no such thing. So it's just a way that depending on how comfortable you as a team decide, that would be best. And then you can define the rows. So you just need to add the rows here. So the rows could be, again, it's interesting. You can have the rows, for example, as a team, you can have one row and you can just use the index cards or things like that, the post-its. Or you can have, for example, one row for one person in the team. So if you've got, for example, Dave can have one row, Sarah could have another row, and then you have got another for Paul, another for Venkat. So depending on how many ever members you've got, you can actually track for each of the users. You can do that. Or you can track it based on the project as well. So for example, this could be the front end. So you can have one whole row for front end, one for the back end. We are going to talk about how you can actually mix and match these different projects into one board. I'm going to show that to you in the next few slides. Very powerful tool, that's why. And then you can use minimal text as possible. So try and not jam too much text into that. Make it just enough so that they understand what this is about. And then try and use colorful post-its, index cards, or whatever. If you're trying to do it physically, as I mentioned, you can actually use the brown sheet running through, and then on the top of it, you can actually write these columns, draw these columns using Sharpies, and then you can put the, you can try and use those, or you can use some of the electronic boards. So you've got electronic Kanban boards like Trello, Jira. You can try and use those as well, and try and complete your board. So the rows can be, as I just mentioned, it could be the persons. You can have one for Sarah, one for Dave, one for Paul, one for Venkat, but you can also have, for example, for project, you can have, for example, based on the work stream. So all of these, you can try and mix and match. You can try work it out and see if it is working, then okay, stick to it. Otherwise, you change it. So there's no prescriptive way that this is the only way that should be done again. And then try and add pictures and photos if you can, so that it actually brings out more life. And that's what I typically do. I've got these personas and things like where we stick those Barbara, we've got Smitha. So depending on this, we actually try and use whether it works, this feature works for Barbara, does it work for Smitha? So depending on their characteristics, their demographics, their psychographics and attitudes and values, we will try and evaluate how they would perceive this feature as. And then you can also try and use magnets in the back of it. Just stick with some of the glue. Super glue is what I typically use for the magnets. Just small little magnet that can be used, and just button magnets, and then you can stick it, easy to move around if it is a whiteboard with a iron back. So you can use the magnets here and the easy to move stuff instead of the post-its which actually fall down the next day. So the glue is not strong enough, as we mentioned, for the post-its. Otherwise, you can try and use index cards, and I typically use index cards just of this size, the palm size. And yeah, this is something like what I typically use as an index card. This is the size of an index card. And you can actually use the cellophane tape on the sellotape on the back, so to stick it, and it's the more. And I would suggest not to use it directly on the walls, but I would try and use the brown sheet, and then that is actually about a meter. You can actually buy it for 1 meter width, and you can run it across the room depending on how big a board you need. You can do that. So these are the things that you would typically need to create your own board, Kanban board, and then voila. So once you have got that, it's easy to track and manage. So you can actually try and see that this is analysis, development, acceptance, production, and you can, within this, you can have ongoing or done. You can have work in progress, completed, deployed, each of these. So you can still have further things, and you can use pictures, images, photos, These are the index cards I was talking about. And here, these are the post-its, magnets, anything, all of these could be done. And then again, in the context of Scrum, you can try and see the definition of done. You need to have the definition of done, right? So how can you actually say that this is actually done? So you need to have an agreement, and that's what we're going to define earlier, and we're going to complete, and this goes on. So this is a typical usage and application of a Kanban board.